and welcome to today's 18 Group webinar on best practices for building high-performance data infrastructures. My name is Sarah Underwood and I'm an editor here at 18 Group, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Umair Waheed, Head of Product Marketing at Yellow Brick, Will Windsor-Sale, Partner, Execution Analytics and Architecture at Redburn, and Enrico Cacciatore, Senior Quantitative Trader and Head of Market Structure and Trading Analytics at Voya Investment Management. I'll ask them all to introduce themselves in a few minutes, but first just a few hints and tips for you on how to make best use of the webinar. To the right of your video screen, you'll see a Slido panel with poll questions and a place for you to ask questions. We'll run 3 poll questions during the webinar, so please do place your votes and we'll see a little bit about what you're thinking. Please put your questions for our speakers in the Q&A section whenever you like, and we'll take the questions as we go along and as many of them as we can. That's enough from me. So let me come back to our speakers. Umair, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Umair Waheed. I'm Head of Product Marketing for Yellow Brick Data, and we're a platform that is particularly resonating in financial services in terms of being a data platform for people to deliver high-performance data analytics infrastructures. So yeah, keen to share what we're seeing in the market and really hear from the other speakers as well as to what's going on.
Excellent, thank you. And coming to you, Will.
Hi everyone, I'm Will Windsor-Sale. I run trading technology and analytics at Redburn, who are one of Europe's largest independent brokers. As a sell-side broker, we have a huge amount of data from our vendors, from venues and everywhere else. And dealing with that data and finding insights in it is what allows us to give better performance to our clients. So it's absolutely essential to our business. So very excited to talk about that and to see what everyone else has got to say.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And over to you, Enrico.
Yeah, Enrico Cacciatore with Voya Investment Management. Here, it's really about, Voya has grown. You've probably seen recently Allianz acquisition of the global, their U.S. funds. And it's really about bringing and stitching together data to leverage it for the investment product process to, provide better returns and really be trying to help progress that journey across to better improve access to data and leveraging that data.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And let's start our conversation. And I'm going to come back to you, Enrico, and setting the scene. How would you describe the current state of high performance data analytics infrastructure across capital markets and its limitations too?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think the exciting part is we're making great inroads, places like Yellowbrook, Google Cloud, Azure, and so forth, really setting up a really solid foundation. I think now is not only legacy and siloed infrastructures that really challenge us, but I think another key component is really the regulatory and legal landscape of how accessing data and who can see it, especially from the transactional side of it, where we want to see end-to-end information. We want to see it and have ability to sort of best of breed development. And so we're going that direction. And that's why someone like myself, and I think the buy side, is really try to help educate and understand how we can really, data can be permissioned, it can be encrypted in a solid way besides just perimeter security. So we're going that direction, but it needs a little push. Okay,
Uma, what would you add there? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And echoing some of the things that Enrico was saying. So, we're definitely seeing our customers really get excited about data again and be really passionate about making use of data to deliver better outcomes for their customers and essentially for their margins as well, deliver more interesting, more useful products. But we're still seeing quite a lot of fragmentation in terms of how organizations are managing data. Data is still spread across far too many systems. It's still quite a heavy lift to get that data in the right place, in the right format for people to actually make use of it. Often, requiring esoteric skill sets. So, some data locked in a platform requiring very specific skill sets to get access to it. Real-time data being in a different place to historic data, and then all the the new data sources, and I'm sure that the guys on the call are starting to ingest all the sort of alternative data sources coming in as well. And you're just having a single place where that all comes together is a challenge. And Enrico mentioned the cloud. We're seeing people start to flirt with the cloud and try and understand how to mix the cloud into their analytics infrastructures, and that's not an easy challenge. So we're seeing that play out as well. And I think we're also coming off the back of some disenchantment with some big data initiatives that happened in the last decade or so, where kind of people brought into these kind of Nirvana type solutions that we're going to solve world peace, and we're seeing a little bit of backlash from that. It's like, well, people being a little bit more careful, and the good thing is they're being more discerning about the decisions they make around data, and understanding that data is strategic and they can't just land a new platform, kind of expect everything to work. So yeah, so a lot of exciting initiatives in customers, more strategic thinking, I think is definitely what we're seeing, and people realizing that they need to modernize some of their legacy platforms and start to consolidate the data and make it available to more people in a consumable fashion. And we're all becoming more impatient as well. That's the other thing. So we all want that. We all want the data like that, right? We don't want to wait for hours to have this stuff happen. It just needs to be there.
Great, thank you both. And through the webinar, we'll be talking about how you get there. Fantastic. But let's run our first audience poll now. The question is, what would be the key objectives of implementing high performance data analytics infrastructure at your organization? You can select any amount of the boxes as are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, let me bring in Will to describe, regardless of cost and resource, the capabilities and outcomes of optimal real-time high performance data infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you. I think for us, there are different kind of ideas of optimization depending on what you're dealing with. That we either talk about sort of very fast data. So if we're dealing with market data, it is absolutely all about low latency, getting data from where it needs to go to where we need it as fast as possible. But more importantly, in a reliable, consistent way. That I would always rather take a slightly lower latency as long as it's consistent and sort of known, than a much more sort of jittery latency in exchange for something slightly quicker. That's all well and good for your kind of ultra low latency one end of high performance. On the other side, we have just quantity of data. That we have huge data sets which we need to process, whether they be market data, whether they be our internal sort of performance, and now we get sort of more and more vendors opening up access to data. I have huge audit trails coming from 5 different providers, all of which I need to process in not microseconds, but in a very short time to a human viewer, and being able to handle that quantity of data is just as challenging as being able to do it in low latency. Alongside all of this, there is the security aspect, which is absolutely key. That with market data, we have a lot of restrictions over who can see that data and what we can do with it. So we need to be completely sure about what we're moving and where. With the other data, there are wider sensitivities and a lot more complications around who we want to be able to access data. So for me, the kind of optimal outcome is performance in terms of whether that's latency or throughput, or ideally both, but also having control over where the data is, who can access it, and making it available in that controlled way.
Okay, thank you. Enrico, what's your sort of optimal view of a real-time high performance data infrastructure?
Yeah, no, and we'll hit upon most everything that's really important. And I think the key thing is understanding who you are, as an organization, and where do you add value, and then defining what structure it optimally fits that, right? So if you're a market maker, anybody that requires low latency infrastructure, right? That's going to be a very different proposal than someone like Avoya. That's really our value is consuming data, trying to find patterns, recognizing that, and providing future long-term outperformance versus the market, right? And so our needs versus somebody that's low latency, very different. So I think what kind of structure best fits everybody, and it's really the key thing is integration and leveraging what's there. And the key point is integration, is really having these microservices that are available in a plug and play format, where they have some sort of common language. There's an API to tap into that. And then you outsource to providers that are really good, whether it's a market data provider that cleanses the data and it has low latency, and you can leverage that in a solid way, right? Or somewhere where you can house your proprietary data that's accessible and permissioned and encrypted in a way that you can maybe provide it to third parties in a way you feel comfortable. So that's the key part. And I feel like, back to that first question, is the siloed, where there's not a lot of common languages that we're communicating, or translations that we can provide. And I think that's where we're kind of going, and that is critical, especially from a machine learning, artificial intelligence perspective, where you put models on there and you want to make it seamless for them to be able to understand what am I consuming, what am I analyzing, and stuff like that. So that's really where the sort of the optimal frontier is going, where we have all these components that are accessible, and you determine what pieces fit best for you at a price point that best fits for you as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see the results of the poll, if we may, and see what our audience is thinking. Will, would you like to comment on that? These are the things that are on the wish list. Is that as you might expect?
I think it's what I might expect. I think there's sort of comes with a word of warning that infrastructure can improve your access to the data. It doesn't in its own necessarily improve data quality. You can collect all the data you want, you can have it easily available, but there's always that kind of manual oversight over, is this actually good data that we're storing, or are we just storing it for the sake of it? So I'm be very cautious about that first one, but absolutely agility, access to data, profitability are all essential parts of a modern business, and they're all driven by data.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for voting, everybody. And let me come back to Umair. What best practice approaches can firms take to get started on the journey to building modern high-performance data infrastructure for big data? Obviously, a big bang approach probably isn't the best way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've already heard from Enrico and Will that there are multiple different sort of consumers of data across buy side and sell side, but also within each organization. You've got the the people within an organization that need to be creating products and need to be doing lots of historical analysis, and you've got the people that need to be acting in real time, including sort of compliance functions and reporting functions. So I think from a planning perspective, you have to start with an eye to the future. You can't just focus on today's requirement. You've got to think of data as a platform that's going to evolve over time. You don't want to lock your data into particular use cases that you have in your mind now. But I think that as Enrico started to talk about, right, you need to be able to plug in new analytics, new ideas into the future. So the idea is to make this fluid platform that is able to incorporate any style of data, be it real time or batch, and any volume of data, and also deal with the huge concurrency that's out there. So I think from a planning perspective, make sure you plan to be a victim of your own success. It's one of the things we're seeing in a lot of organizations as they deploy these data infrastructures and give access to more people to more data, right? So we're talking about centralizing centralizing a data service. It doesn't mean centralizing your data into one platform, but having a common service, a common language, a common layer, rather than having different technologies, but because some data is moving quickly, some data maybe is living in the cloud, some other data is on premise, and some other data is in some legacy system or a third party provider. You want a commonality of approach across all of that, and that drives agility, and that agility is important. So modernize, harmonize, simplify. These are all key things that need to be done, but recognize that you're gonna actually have volumes and expectations of data that are much higher than they are today. So you need a platform that can then scale and burst, and cloud is part of the answer to that. And I think we'll discuss that later on in the webinar. But you need to be able to react quickly and have that agility. But I think the other thing is, like, I think not to jump onto any specific bandwagons. There are no panaceas out there. You've got to plan for hybrid. Some data will always need to be on premises, right? Organizations are investing in colo facilities that are close to exchanges, so to have low latency access to data, and then you're thinking about shipping some of this data out to the cloud, which then adds additional latency. So you've got to be able to host your data in the place that makes sense for the consumption pattern that you want. And so having a fabric like Yellowbrick, I have to say, that extends across cloud and on premises and gives you that consistency of experience is important. And you also don't want to kind of lock data into skills are important. So it's the everyday analyst or person that needs access to this data. You shouldn't have to be a case that you need to go to a specialized team of people to figure out actually how to run this query or how to do this analysis over 5 years of history. It's got to be accessible to people that have general data skills. So we'd say try and stick to open sort of frameworks, common frameworks that keep your options open in terms of absorbing innovations in the broader data ecosystem. Enrico talks about kind of best of breed approaches. There's lots of innovations happening, but so make sure that your whatever technology platform you choose, whatever approach you choose, allows you to plug those things in over time, and allows you to really quickly innovate.
Okay, that's great. Enrico, how would you suggest us getting started on this journey to a high performance data infrastructure?
And it kind of gets back to my previous comment. And I think a lot of it too is that last question where it says data quality. Well, data quality is really, that's where the value, people, if you're one of some of the largest market participants in the world, their true value is taking the raw consumable data and translating it into some signal, right? It might be that signal of where's the market going in the next 2 microseconds, right? And be able to make a calculation, translate, cleanse that data of all this raw market data coming in and do that. And so that's their differentiator, right? And they control end to end every single, looking at latency at the gateway and saying, even before the exchange knows that they're having problems, knowing that there's issues, right? And so they control end to end, and that they need to have the expertise in-house end to end as well, because that's their value add. Whereas somewhere like Avoya, it's very different. And we want to be the sort of player, almost like if you look at what's the differentiator of now the modern battlefield for, say, the military, it's taking all the individual components and allowing them to communicate to each other, right? So if you have, a jet that's flying over, that's communicating to soldiers on the ground, communicating to, to the Navy, what's going on, right? They're all communicating to each other, providing data information that now can be analyzed and evaluated. I think like Avoya, same thing. We're taking, say, unique alt data sets, putting learners on it, understanding signals, right? Then taking market data, consuming all that information, optimizing it, and trying to make some positive return over whatever set duration that we're trying to determine. And I think that's a key aspect is understanding who you are and working with providers that are going to help you get there, and knowing what are your skill sets, what are your strengths, and being able to outsource. It's like trying to collect all, for like a buy side, collecting all raw market data and then trying to do that, outsource that to somebody that does that much, much better. But I think the key point of it for us is the accessibility of the data in a clean, concise format that we can consume.
Excellent, thank you. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the cloud. And Will, can I come to you, please, and to tell us a little bit about how firms can leverage cloud to improve the kind of price performance of their data infrastructures?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Enrico's stolen one of my quotes from most of these sort of webinars I come on, that the key thing to almost all of these kind of technological questions is, where do you add value and what do you actually need? You always start with that and then you work on the technology from there. And I think when you're sort of talking about cloud, only 10, 15 years ago, the initial reaction was, that's too expensive, it's too slow, it's too jittery, I can't go anywhere near that. Nowadays, that's really changed, and I think there are still lots of situations where cloud is not suitable. So low latency market data into an SOR, you are not going to put that into a public cloud. That is a huge latency addition, huge risk for no real value. Anything that is slower, large amounts of data, unless you're operating at a huge scale yourself, is almost always, from my experience, cheaper, easier to run in the cloud, as long as it's properly architected. That, you know, there's just the cost of storing data is not the raw cost of actually running it and the electricity. It's having a team who are maintaining that, keeping an eye on your comms room in the office and everything like that. It's also the time to market. That previously, if I wanted to start up a new service or something within the firm, I would have to go to IT, I'd have to sign procurement, they'd have to go out and get some servers, bring them in, rack them up. 6 weeks later, someone's stolen that server because they need it for a different service. Nowadays, I can deploy something, spin up a virtual machine in the cloud within seconds. And that is orders of magnitude, over orders of magnitude quicker than it ever would be trying to deploy that stuff on traditional hardware. And yeah, medium-sized firms like us, focus on where we can add value. And where we can add value is definitely not maintaining data centers and checking comms lines and that sort of thing. Where we can add value is in the actual product and the data itself. So cloud allows you very quick time to market, and the kind of big cloud providers, AWS, Azure, have all of the tools and everything ready to go. So to Umair's point about sort of having lots of different data in lots of different places, I can have a long-term glacial storage data lake and I can dump all of the files into there. It costs pennies to run, but I know all of my data is accessible when I need it. Next to that, I can have a structured SQL database with my sort of very focused queryable data. And next to that, I can have a MongoDB, NoSQL for running much more sort of real-time interactive things. I can bring all of these up very quickly and I can scale them as I need. I also have a lot more optionality around compute power. I don't have to get a cluster, 200 cores sitting in this corner of the office doing nothing in case one of my quants wants to run a back test. I can get that when I need it, pay for what I actually use, which just gives you the flexibility, time to market and everything that you need to deliver the agility and to deliver the insights that is the reason you're collecting all this data in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Umair, what would you say there in terms of cloud and price performance of your data?
Yeah, so cloud is really exciting area for helping organizations with the agility, with those burst capabilities that Will talked about. Being able to really take advantage of data when you need it. So being able to spin up infrastructure on demand and run queries is great. And so we see a lot of organizations that are investing in sort of data lakes where they are putting their data in Glacier or other storage platforms in the cloud where it's ready to it can be queried. The challenge with that, it can still take some time to make that data available to query. So at Yellowbrick, we take a slightly different approach, which is to say, have your data accessible in queryable format, so queryable format. So we use the cloud storage infrastructures, the low-cost storage to host the data, but by ingesting it into a Yellowbrick database, which is sitting on top of that, you're able to make that data available to people as and when they need it, and you get all the benefits of the cloud, right? So the cloud is actually more expensive, like server for server. So running something in, I think that surprises some people sometimes that haven't run data centers. But running a server in your own data center is often cheaper than running it in the cloud, because in the cloud you're paying for all sorts of services and resilience, and obviously the cloud markup as well. So where you've got sort of 24/7 kind of operations, you kind of have to figure out, well, where's the best place to run this? If all my users are in my, on my own network, in my own offices, in my own, close to my own data centers, then you want your data to be hosted there. But for the types of activities we'll start hinting at, the ad hoc burst, I've got a new product I want to experiment with. I want to run a back test against 7 years of history to see if this product flies. Cloud is a great place to do that. So going back to my sort of last answer, it's about being able to leverage both, but with a commonality of tooling and skill sets, not having to run different things in different places. But the great thing about the cloud is you can turn it off. You can literally say the thing that costs money in the cloud is compute. So storage, as Will said, really low cost storage, and that applies even if you're running a database platform. But it's when you're actually trying to compute answers to interesting things. And a lot of the cloud providers and the cloud provider solutions are geared towards sort of more OpEx models as well. So there's no upfront cost to setting these things up. You pay per second, pay per minute, which can be of great value for those ad hoc workloads. But then as you start to look at workloads and you start to go from experimentation into production and needing to run that model, that algorithm, that analytic, every minute or every second, then you start to think, well, actually, I don't really want to be an operating model. I want to have a fixed cost of delivery for that service. And so actually having something that is, the more queries I run, the more money I pay, effectively becomes a margin or a tax on your product or your business. So you want to be able to fix those costs. So, again, one of our differentiators is Yellowbrick, is that we allow you to do on-demand capabilities, but we actually drive people towards fixing their costs and giving them headroom within those fixed cost parameters to be able to scale and burst, as well as do the full-on. If you're running something for 3 or 4 hours as an experiment task, then run it purely on demand, and you'll save money that way. So, but make sure that you can move data effectively between on-premises and the cloud. Treat them as one data infrastructure, not 2 different places to host your data, and make sure they can cope with the types of things that Enrico was talking about in terms of the real-time data, as well as that batch data. So leveraging cloud, keep an eye on your financial, the sort of a FinOps side of the cloud. Cloud is not just a data center. You've got to manage the costs in the cloud to make it effective. It's a new skill set as well. So you've got to think about how to, building an organization that can manage the cloud, that has the skills to do that, is a new thing. Not all organizations are able to do that. To Enrico's point, you might want to outsource some of that to other providers. But yeah, I mean, cloud is great for those burst, unpredictable workloads where you can turn on a dime, create a new product, test it, run it, trial it, and go at it really quickly.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the technologies that can be useful here. We've obviously talked about cloud. And Enrico, what other things would you say can be helpful as you build out this high performance data infrastructure?
Well, I don't know if it really covers the question specifically, but it definitely hits on the take back your control. That's there for Yellowbrick is, especially for the buy side, the transactional data. We really have no control of that data. It's being consumed and utilized by the sell side, and the buy side. I mean, looking at the data in a T+1 fashion at best. I mean, that's appalling, right? So we want to take back control, and how can we do that? And it's really gets back to my very first question of working with regulatory legal to say, hey, when I send an order to this provider, that's my order, and what happens downstream is I need to have access to that in a reasonable format. And what that would be, I'm not looking for it some nanosecond time frame, but within milliseconds, within seconds, being able to access that. Now, how is that capable? It becomes much more of a distributed format where you leveraging, say, FIX orchestra, right? The common language of FIX protocol that everybody can understand. Everybody, it's got pre-formatted headers. Being able to tap into that using either API directly into API, or drop copies, or via directly into multiple distributed formats, and even consuming information directly from the exchanges. So now I get improve that data quality, because now I'm not just leveraging and consuming the transactional data from that specific broker, but if there's third parties that touch that order downstream, I'll have ability to look at that, even to where I did an execution at an exchange, and I received that same information from the exchange, and then I look at it and normalize it back. So, and now my data quality is improved, because I'm not relying solely on one party to provide information. And so I think that distributed format and leveraging the cloud becomes key. But being able to determine where that data resides, it shouldn't matter. It's really connectivity and usability and permissioning. It becomes the critical component of that.
Okay, coming to you, Will, what text do you see as being particularly useful here?
I think, sort of as Umair said, the proper infrastructure needs to be a mixture. We have some high speed, low latency, we have some on-prem, we have some cloud. The key technology is one that allows you to join all of that together. Again, what you ideally want as an organization is a single source of the truth. If somebody wants a client, that should come from your CRM. If they want order information, that should come from our trading platform, but then join to fixed data, join to data from other brokers or venues, and everything else. And all at the same time, you need to put security on top of this. So again, I wouldn't want to name any of my competitors and anything else, but yeah, one of the dangers we find is everybody wants to standardize that sort of data layer and that visibility, which means we now have lots of different standards for doing that. There are loads of different service buses which allow me to transfer messages. Every provider and every person out there wants to use a slightly different one. Within an organization, we may pick one. You then need every other department to agree to that and to make sure you're picking the same one. So yeah, there are lots of the underlying technology for how you store the data, where you store it, should be specific to the type of data and how you're getting it in and what you're doing with it. That sort of data normalization layer is key, but that needs to be driven at a organizational level to make sure that everybody is accessing it in the same way, and that layer gives you everything you need. That if I've got, some people are investigating that with Python, they need access to that as it is. Other people want to write queries and generate reports and everything else. We don't want those two people picking different data sets because they're accessing them a slightly different way. And if you can get that layer working and accessible and actually used by the whole company, that's where you really start to get value from it. And control, because it all goes to a central security system, and you know exactly who can access what at every point.
Okay, sounds like the optimal thing we were discussing earlier. That's fantastic. Let's move more specifically now to talk about data fabric, which is, I imagine, interest and is being used by some firms. Let's ask our audience, if we may, what the challenges are for them in implementing data fabric. So you should be able to see that poll question now in your Slido panel. So please let us know what challenges data fabric raises. And again, you can tick as many of the boxes as you like. And while you do that, let me come to Umair to talk about the challenges and solutions of implementing data fabric and what types of cloud environment this best sits in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Data fabric is a conversation that's coming up more and more in our customer conversations in terms of people trying to investigate it. It's an emerging pattern. It's probably worth saying it's not it's not yet a technology in its own right. So there's no one technology that can meet the demands of what people are thinking around a data fabric. And what's key to a data fabric, actually, and kind of touching on the last question in terms of the tools that you need, is actually understanding where your data is, what data you have, what sensitivity your data has. So actually, one of the key things around it's not just the data, it's also the metadata. So then the team started to touch on it in terms of what are the standards, and having standard kind of taxonomies and categorization of data as well as standard ways of describing the sensitivity of different pieces of data and where it lives. So metadata is actually key, because the data fabric is, as a conversation, is a lot about automation, and the only way you can create automation of your data using advanced intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, is if you have the correct metadata that describes where your data is, where it's coming from, what the latencies to expect in that data are. I feel like data fabric we're probably some distance away from a pure data fabric in terms of the nirvana of some automated agent figuring out how to join all this data together in a way that's reliable enough to be able to then execute a trading strategy off the back of, right? There's still usually some human intervention, but things move pretty fast in that space, and the people that innovate there will certainly have a technical advantage. But key to all of this is having data available to those technologies and those platforms. So you need the metadata, so you need to understand and have some sort of catalog, some sort of infrastructure of where your data lives across externally, as Enrico said, APIs, other players, other participants, as well as your own data. But then also having a common, and I've said this before, right? A common data infrastructure that can service all those different needs. We typically, in terms of a language, people are able to access all that data, whether it be streaming data or batch data through kind of regular SQL, and also be able to have that differentiated level of access, both in terms of security that Will mentioned, so be able to secure data in a way that's still allows you to have that sort of competitive element between different teams in some of the institutions where you don't necessarily want to have everyone seeing what everyone else is doing, but also give differentiated levels of performance. So if you're going to have a central data hub, the danger is that everyone's on a shared infrastructure, that if you have a team that really want to do something interesting, they're kind of impacting everyone else. So being able to have that differentiated performance between teams is also important as a challenge of establishing a data fabric, because without that, it can turn into a mess. And if people have a bad experience of consuming data from your common data fabric, they're going to go and do what they did before, which is to go create a siloed system off to the side, which does what they need, and it doesn't really help. So yeah, I mean, it's a slightly rambling answer, but hopefully the team will be able to add more.
Okay. Quick question from Enrica and Will. Do you see value in data fabric? Have you had a go? Enrica?
No, I definitely see it, right? I don't want to go too long, but it's really about the ingestion, right? And having all the components of whether it's ingestion or the confirmation layer of it, or the consumption layer, right? So and then on top of that is now security around who permissions that. So and there's different players that do well on that. But again, as Will stated, all of these translations and the APIs introduce latency. So if latency is a critical component of it, you have to accept that the data, this data fabric is going to cause some challenges as far as receiving that data in a timely fashion. And timely fashion is vastly different from multiple participants.
What would you say, Will? Is it of interest to you?
I think it's definitely of interest. I think coming at it from a slightly different angle, looking at the challenges, one of the difficult parts we see is getting in the data is easy. Normalizing that data, understanding that data, as long as you know what you're dealing with, is doable. It's often a bit of work, but definitely something you can do. We're a relatively small organization. We still have probably 5 different views on what counts as a client, and nobody is willing to compromise to the other person's view. So the idea that we put out a single sort of data fabric, and if you want to look up a client, this is what it looks like, becomes incredibly difficult. Because everybody wants their own view on it, And actually coming up with those taxonomies and that data structure is really difficult to get right. You need people who understand data, who understand the business end use of that data as well, to actually design that into a way that's going to be useful. It's not a task that you can throw to a random IT team or the people who provide that data. Yeah, even orders and trades, every provider we get a view of orders and trades from has a slightly different structure to the way they match them, what counts as a child order, how the fills go in. And actually getting to that normalization layer requires a lot of insight and a lot of work, but also buy-in from the rest of the firm. That we don't have a sort of complete global data framework, but we're getting pretty close. And yet I will still have people who want, oh, can you just email me a spreadsheet with that data in once a day, because I like to look at it on the train home and I don't want to log into the visualization tool to see that in what is objectively a better format, but it's not what they're used to. So there's definitely a lot of uphill struggle getting people buying into the new process and the new ways of working.
Sure, a big cultural issue, I'm sure. Excellent, thank you very much indeed. Let's see the results of the poll if we can, and see what our audience is suffering from, as it were. Umair, would you like to comment on that, why people are finding it difficult to think and build data fabric?
Yeah, pretty much. Hopefully, what I'd expect. People dealing with legacy technologies. Actually holding them back. Having. How do you cope with that? How do you innovate at the same time as dealing with these legacy challenges, modernizing those legacy debt? What's the right time to get rid of things? How do you deal with all that? Actually, there's a huge amount of savings to be had by modernizing some of these legacy technologies and freeing up the capital from some of the licenses and things, and repurposing that spend elsewhere. But yeah, distributed or siloed data ownership is if data is siloed, then you're not getting the maximum value out of it. You've got to get it into the hands of people, the business, who actually know what to do with it. So if you lock it into a silo, either a technology silo or a business domain silo, then it's limiting its value.
Okay, thank you very much for voting. Thank you for your comments, Umair. And I have a few audience questions which we'll take now, I think. And the first one, I am going to put this one to you, Will. It says, where does the panel see the best ROI when building high performance data infrastructure? We've touched on this kind of thing. So obviously it's, how are we going to prove this?
At the risk of repeating myself and Enrico, it's where your business sees the most value.
Okay.
That what adds value to you. For a firm like Redburn, having all of our sort of order and trade data centrally and consumable and being able to mix that with market data allows us to provide genuine insights to then improve our trading performance, which ultimately leads to more people trading with us and more income. There is a direct path between introducing that kind of proper data management and revenue at the end of the day, which is what we're all here to achieve. There are lots of other areas we could invest in and lots of other areas we do invest in, but it all comes down to what drives your business and where can you add value and what are you doing that isn't unique to you. That if you have people running around maintaining servers that don't need to, it may be cheaper to get rid of them and use a central service.
Okay, so it's person by person or organization by organization. Yeah. Okay, lovely. I have two data fabric questions, so I'm going to put them together and see what you can do. The first one says, how would the panel describe data fabric in a way that we can share with the business and potential users? The next one says, and please feel free to answer them in whatever you like, what advice would the panel give on making sure data fabric is fit for purpose and fit for the future? So first, how would you describe data fabric so that people can really understand it on people on the ground?
Yeah, if you think about the challenges associated with ingesting and incorporating new data sets, data fabric essentially takes some of those challenges away by applying automation. So making it faster, easier, cheaper to be able to incorporate new data sets by leveraging machine intelligence to do that, rather than the really heavy lift of human intelligence, which is the historic way of doing it.
Okay, lovely. And how can you know it's going to be fit for purpose once it's built? You've mentioned quite a lot about it, and it is still relatively a new concept. How's the best way forward?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like with some of that's not quite there yet. I think you need to be able to experiment with it. You need to be able to reconcile some of the things, and there'll be some element of parallel running and seeing how these things operate. But I think that's a really difficult question to answer. But I think it will be the credibility of data fabric will be established over time as to whether it is a real thing. Is it how much is it hype, and how much is it helping us, and also the cost of delivering it is also going to be important, because if it's going to have a huge lift in terms of the the bottom line, that's sort of the cost impact of it, then it's got to pay off from an ROI perspective as well. So yeah.
Okay, another cost question, and I think we'll leave it there. Enrico, this one for you. How can we win management buy-in for yet another round of infrastructure implementation? And I am sure there are a lot of people thinking that. How do you win that? And you've got an infrastructure. How are you going to get them to pay for the next one?
It gets back to that first question of ROI, right? It's like if you can justify, what by migrating to this new infrastructure, what additional services is it going to provide, and what kind of return on the investment? I mean, that's the simple answer. The problem is because some cases, because some of this new technology, sometimes you really don't know what the future holds. So it's challenging, right? So a lot of times it's communicating and educating, what that potential holds, right? And when we talk about, say, data fabric, the beauty of it is really, I think threefold: is democratization of the data, a better sense of data protection in some ways, and then I think it also increases the intelligence of the data that you have. That basically its data quality is improved because it's much more of a managed machine, automated fashion, and less likely to have potential errors.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for your questions. And we do have more, so I will share them with our sponsor later. And thank you to our speakers for their answers. And let's move on. And Will, how do you see the potential business and operational benefits of modern high performance data infrastructure? We talked about what it should look like earlier. What are we getting out of it?
I think let's start with the boring side. First, you get regulatory compliance, that a proper infrastructure, I can meet my requirements to store things in an immutable fashion. I can make sure that they're properly encrypted, and I can make sure I have controls and audits about who can access and who can edit that information. So one of the big advantages, and I think this speaks to the previous question about how can you justify a new infrastructure, you might need to have one because regulators, particularly in financial services, are getting more and more aware of the dangers of sort of data and the controls that are needed around it. So on a very boring side, you get controls which you are legally required to have, or CIS says you probably should have. In terms of the benefits of it, I think there are kind of clearly defined benefits. So, we're talking before about return on investment. Where do you invest? There are lots of things which you can say, if I had this data, I could get more insight here, I could build a new product, I could deliver a new service to clients. A well-built one then has the additional benefits which are much harder to, which are not enough to justify the investment on their own, but when you actually see them, when you get them, they can be revolutionary. So now we've got a proper infrastructure in place. What used to take us weeks to onboard a new provider, get that data in, pass it through, get it to the front end, within a day, I can get data from any third party on my trader's desktop, tracking what they're doing in the front end, working with them and providing insight. If I said I needed a generic thing to be able to do that, that would be very hard to invest in. But when you get a new requirement and you can turn it around that quickly with minimal effort, that then suddenly pushes your agility, pushes your ability to onboard new clients, to try new ideas, and just lets you grow as a business a lot quicker and a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. Umair, what would you add to that in terms of benefits? Let's go beyond compliance.
Yeah, so just from an operational perspective, obviously, if you can you have faster access to data, you can make decisions faster in terms of understanding risk and taking action faster to minimize that risk, and so there's all sorts of operational benefits from having high performance data. But I think there's also an interesting human element to it as well, in terms of as an organization, if you do have this data fabric, this high performance infrastructure in place, it can act as a sort of recruitment sergeant as well. People want to work for organizations where using data isn't a challenge, where they have ready access to data, where they know they can do their best work. So I think there's a human element in terms of attracting the right talent there as well, and making people's lives better, allowing them to spend their time doing the things which are revenue generating, not as Will started to suggest, the kind of the infrastructure, the heavy lift around managing the data. They can actually apply their intelligence to a business problem and use the data to solve new challenges.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to move to our last question now, because we are pretty tight on time, and I'm going to ask all our speakers what advice they would give to practitioners working on a high performance data infrastructure. And can I come back to you, Umair? Would you want to kick this one off, please?
Yeah, great, thanks, Sarah. I think just be prepared for success. So when you do have this massive influx of users asking more questions, that you're able to service it. So think about it in advance, be able to be prepared to scale and have that agile platform. Hybrid is here to stay. So be able to handle data across clouds and your on-premises or your colo facilities or your partners. All of that is around to stay. Don't pivoting to one presents both risks and challenges from a regulatory perspective, but is just unrealistic as well. And you've got to be able to use data as a differentiator for your business, which means putting it in the hands of people that can do the best work with it. So getting the operational side of data out of the way, and that's where some things like data fabric start to become interesting over time.
Okay, thank you, Enrico. What advice would you provide? You got your mute on.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I think, especially from the practitioners, typically have been hands-on. They're on-prem, controlling every aspect of it, and in full control. Going to more of a hybrid data fabric, or outsourcing to the cloud, you lose control of that, and therefore you're going to have to be much more comfortable in not having full control of everything downstream. So that leads to sort of, what are the things you really need to understand, and sort of really understand what's your goals and objectives and how do you achieve that. And when you're working with that third-party provider, ask the questions, right? Questions you have, and maybe you don't understand, or you do. So being comfortable answering that question, and then being flexible in things where things might fail at first, and finding additional solutions. And I think a real key part of this is collaboration. We have to work together, all participants to come together. And the key to data fabric is, I think, is really collaboration in multiple facets of it. And to do that, we have to work for a common goal in general.
Okay, thank you. And Will, some final words from you, please.
Yeah, I think just really echoing what Enrico was saying, that understand what it is that's actually important to you. That goes, everything from what data do you actually need, and what format do you need it, who needs to access it, but also what parts of that process can you actually add value to, what bits should you look to outsource, what bits need to be in-house. And I think all of that comes with, you need somebody who actually understands that underlying data, what it means and how it fits together. That this is not data is not technology. You can't sort of pick up someone who knows one bit of data and say, well, data, go and have a look at this. They need to understand what that data means, how it ties together, and be able to pull value and actually understand it. So I think it's know your people, know your technology, and get the right ones in place based on what's important to your business.
Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience today. Thank you too to Yellow Brick for sponsoring the webinar. Before we close, just a note on a few forthcoming A-Team group webinars. If you scroll down your screen to additional options, you can sign up for webinars covering a practical guide to dual UK and EU regulatory reporting, the role of data lineage in KYC and ESG investigations, and the challenges and potential of data marketplaces for financial data. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Will, Umair and Enrico, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.